and they have a bunny. So my dad was over there building their bunny a bunny room.
Oh, how nice.
So nothing new for them.
Your dad's a nice guy.
Yeah. We put him to work.
That's good. Keep him out of trouble.
Yes, exactly. He just finished, I designed my brother's bathroom. So he just finished tiling
Wow.
the room and it looks so cool.
Cool. All right. Well, good for him.
Yeah, keeping him busy.
Yeah, good. All right. So we are rolling here, and I'm going to, so I'll first show you this. I need to do a screen share. I'll just do a share of my entire screen, and we'll bring this guy up. All right. So a lathe, you'll see, when you watch this, you'll see exactly what a lathe is. And this guy is awesome. It's a rectangular piece of wood. Watch your thumb.
Yeah, see the wood.
And so it's kind of like spiked on both ends in the center. So that bow allows him to turn it at least like multiple rotations in one pull. This video is about 6 minutes long, so but you'll see what he does with this. So really you use a chisel, and you gotta have something that turns the wood at a high rate of speed.
That's going to be the key for chess. Okay.
Here you go. All right. There, so how's about that? With a
It's pretty cool.
yeah, with a lathe of that type, that's how, I mean, something like that, where you have like old, like Roman furniture, really a lot of ancient furniture, they would have used a lathe like that. And, nowadays a lathe is attached to, it's the wood is turned by a motor. You've got to have the wood pin like really like in the center of the piece, otherwise it'll wobble. But it's basically the same process. Not using a motorized lathe, like something that has like that has a power source attached to it. So so when you see that like a piece of furniture has turned legs, especially in some of the the earlier like pre-industrial revolution, that's about how they're doing it. So there. Now I'm going to. All right. So let me get no. Actually, I didn't want to do that. That was a mistake. Wrong button. All right, well, let's share my screen. Go to all right, so last week we talked about the Italian Renaissance. Following the Italian Renaissance, it's around basically like the 17th century or the 1600s is generally when the Baroque happens in Italy. One of the reasons for Baroque architecture is the Counter-Reformation. So the Protestant Reformation was a rejection of the papacy or the Pope and the Church as it was under the Pope. The Counter-Reformation is when the Roman Church comes back to basically answer the Protestants. There was well, let's see. The Jesuits that were led by Ignatius Loyola, they were the kind of like the enforcers of the Counter-Reformation. These and they were not, well, they were kind of nasty, but it was really this idea of like they wanted to re-emphasize and express the power and authority of the Catholic Church. So this church architecture is meant to show that. It is a departure from the strict classicism of the Renaissance movement. The suggestion of movement is very important. So you'll see in a lot of these images that there we go. So this is a Baroque facade. Now, there are certain aspects of Italian Baroque. This is very seems kind of like straightforward classical. And then you get this. This is not strictly anything that they would have seen in Rome. This is more inventive. So the Baroque is inventive compared to the Renaissance in terms of its application of classical ornament. These big brackets on the side of the church, up at the top on the second level, on either side of that upper level, are really just like these big, huge scrolls. There's really no precedent for that in the classical architecture. The scale is really exaggerated. The pediment over the door, like up here on the second, like between the first and second floor, there are two. There's a triangular pediment, and then there's a semicircular or curved pediment. They kind of just like pulled out all the stops and made this big, dramatic, theatrical, and to them exciting exciting kind of architecture. It is primarily like with the Italians, it's tied to the Counter-Reformation, so it is tied to ecclesiastical or religious architecture. In France, when we get to the next with Louis XIV, with the French Baroque, it is more about the secular government of the French monarchy. You can't really separate any of these guys from religion at this point, but in French Baroque, it is more about Louis XIV. Okay, so it is more playful. It is more inventive. You can see some exaggeration, or just like some. You see all these classical elements. There's like triangular pediments all over the place, but it's unique. It's like they just like decided we need to have this sort of classical look, but we need it to be for the present day. All right, so here's the interior. Okay, so Baroque architecture, as I just said, meant to celebrate the power and glory of the Roman Catholic Church, and is a declaration of the success. So they decided the Counter-Reformation is a success. Look at these churches. They did not get rid of the Protestants, as we all know. So you can see this dome here again. It's a pendentive dome. You see it's set up on 1, 2, 3. There's an arch hidden there, but that dome is set up on 4 arches. The first one that we saw goes back to Hagia Sophia. Okay, but you can see all this classical ornament, the pilasters and the capitals or the caps on the pilasters. This the festoons here with this like these wreaths of flowers and fruit, and then sculpture. There's this figurative sculpture everywhere. This really is very dynamic. There's a lot going on. They embellish all the surfaces. Here, the altar of Saint Ignatius Loyola, who was the founder of the Jesuit order. He wasn't a saint when that happened, of course, but he became one. And there are these different sculptures on either side of the altar. Triumph of faith over paganism, religion overthrowing heresy. The heresy that is they're talking about the Protestants there. So yeah, dramatic. Look at this. So here you can see these figures. So some of this is painted, some of it is relief sculpture. And really this, light in the center must be God. All of it is just flowing up. But it's like figurative groups that are just all flowing up into, up into and out of the ceiling. So this is a lot. This is, let's just say, compared to the Renaissance, you can say this is over the top. It is emotional, exaggerated light and shadow. Okay. All right. So Bernini was a Italian Baroque architect, and here, this small church, Sant'Andrea al Quirinale, and oval plan. And again, you have these classical elements with Corinthian columns, maybe a composite, like a sort of riff on the Corinthian. This pediment up here, you have the broken pediment. They started doing this where they took this pediment, instead of it being triangular, it has a semicircle, and in this case it's broken, so they can put this sculpture up right in there. So it's still classical. So we're still looking, this is still very much like, it's like an extension of the Renaissance classicism, but it's more contemporary for them. It is more like this is what, this is their version of it in the 17th century. Okay, so transcendence and ascension are clearly implied with the sculptural treatment of the ceiling, and there's God up here. I love this crazy relief sculpture, all of them just kind of climbing up, hanging on, flying, floating. And up here you see all the little Amorini looking down at you. They're up there somewhere in the heavens watching you. So they didn't really know how to quit. So St. Peter's, which was begun in 1506 during the era of the Renaissance, it was completed later in this Baroque era. Now, interestingly, you see the obelisk, which goes back to the Egyptians, and the Romans used it. And then there's a cross on the top. The Catholic Church had no problem absorbing what they might have considered to be pagan symbols and just making them Christian. I recall, have any of you ever heard of St. Christopher? Or did any of you ever have a St. Christopher medal? Well, St. Christopher was the patron saint of travelers. St. Christopher, however, didn't exist. St. Christopher was really based on the German Rhine River god. And he would, the German god of the Rhine River originally was a giant. And you would go to the river and he would, you would have to possibly negotiate with him and get him to walk you across. And you would sit on his shoulders and he would walk across the Rhine River to ferry people back and forth. as a way of persuading some of the Germanic people to convert to Christianity, they told them, you can keep keep your Rhine River god, but we're going to call him St. Christopher. In the 1960s, they finally acknowledged, yes, there really was no such thing as St. Christopher. And so St. Christopher was removed from the canon of saints in the 1960s because they had to finally acknowledge, everybody knows there was really no such person. Just an example of how they had no problem just absorbing something that really allowed them to get people in the church. Now, I grew up Roman Catholic. I don't mention that story as a criticism, but I remember people telling us, we had our St. Christopher medals, which is you'd get something if you're traveling, and somebody pointed out those don't actually work. So, all right. So here is the St. Peter's Basilica. So when they finally finished this, it's in the Baroque era. So St. Peter's in Rome, which is the Pope's home church. So as a Baroque church, Italian Baroque church has got to be spectacular. So here's the interior with, okay. So this little canopy area is a ciborium or baldacchino. It has these really cool twisted columns. I know I mentioned this last time. Solomonic columns, or these twisted columns, and they're called Solomonic because the Europeans went in one of the many crusades where they went and tried to take control of what they called the Holy Land, the area around Jerusalem, from their biblical where you have the biblical origins. Someone found these big old twisted columns, and somebody made up this story that they came from the Temple of Solomon, as mentioned in the Old Testament. And so they became fashionable. And so you'll see them. They're really not based on any European model. They're really based on something more from the area, Babylon. Does anybody know?
What was the question?
Well, I was just curious if anybody has heard anything about these, if you know anything about them. You don't have to have. I just, I'm just curious. Okay, so now here, it's history of furniture. And this is a symbolic chair called the Chair of Peter, or Cathedri Petri. This is the symbolic seat of power. I guess that's the Pope's symbolic seat of power and authority. The Pope does not actually climb up in there and sit in it. I don't think so, anyway. But I remember growing up hearing that the one of the issues that Martin Luther had with the Roman Catholic Church is that there were times when the Pope could claim infallibility. When the Pope speaks from the Chair of Peter, whether literally or symbolically, the Pope is infallible, meaning whatever he says is correct, you cannot argue. That, everybody can be correct. He's a man, he's not a god. So, but I remember hearing that term, hearing that phrase growing up, that, from the, when the Pope speaks from the Chair of Peter. There's the Chair of Peter, right there. It's a sculpture by Bernini. But look at this, like, you've got this like stained glass, you can see it's bright here, but there is the dove of the Holy Spirit with this big aura of light around it, and all of these saints, angels, and rays of light, and you've got these big Corinthian pilasters, which are Roman. It's very interesting how the Christian church absorbed Roman architectural forms. But this is really meant to be this, like, powerful, powerful symbol of the Pope's authority. Now here, the Scala Regia is the entrance to the Vatican. It is the Pope's entrance to the Vatican, is the Pope's residence, and so it is grandly neoclassical. And this stairway that goes up here, and there's another nice bright window at the top. So it's kind of does suggest ascension and transcendence when the Pope leaves the church. So I'm sure I don't know, maybe they had a chorus of angels singing every time the Pope walked up those stairs. And you can see, there we go. Sorry about that. I really need to get rid of this magic mouse. Every time my finger comes close to the surface, it just does whatever it wants. Okay. You can see in here, if you look, this, like the Greek palmette. So they've got just lots and lots of classical ornament. The Roman festoons, medallion, these little floral medallions, Ionic-y, these are not properly like Greek Ionic columns. This is more like a Roman variation, or even their own variation. So if you look at it, you should see classical. But the scale, it's like really like, again, original to the time. Now here, this is sort of like middle of the 17th century. This is some of the stuff I really like about Baroque, is when they just went and just did whatever they felt like doing. It's not symmetrical, so the asymmetry is, this kind of like this, like it's almost like a collage, but I just love how weird it is, with this gigantic cartouche up here and this like strange kind of like scrolly bracketed frame on the top and this curving balustrade. Things supported by angels, so it's as if it is actively, actively being held up. And these little these little towers with the little like kind of chess piece looking peak on them. It almost doesn't even look classical anymore. It's sort of like, as I say, it's turning into a style unique and separating from Roman, from the Renaissance. So again, here's like this is a plan. All right, so there is a comparison with those two floor plans. And here's the interior. It's not big. It's light, a lot of white with some paint, with some paintings in the behind the altars. But it's a very interesting shape. You can see where it has these little side altars, and so it's kind of like this sort of like undulating, like there's this part of the architecture it projects forward, then there's an altar alcove and it projects away. So it's really an interesting, unique kind of a pattern, you might say. So here, so the later one, this is St. Carlo of the Four Fountains. Lighter. As it gets later, they get lighter. There's a fisheye view of the ceiling. And then here, don't worry too much about who made them. Borromini. I'm more interested that you can recognize like the difference between Italian Baroque and French Baroque, or the Renaissance and Italian Baroque. Okay, so dome and lantern. So the lantern is this like cupola on the top. It's not necessarily a lamp, but it is like this. It's kind of almost like the top of a lighthouse is like literally has a lantern or like a very powerful lamp in it. But this cupola that's set on top of a dome or on top of a roof is referred to as a lantern. There's a section of it, and there is the interior. So later in the Italian Baroque, things get more like achromatic. It's just light surfaces, a little bit of gold, a little bit of painting here and there. But you can see up at the top there are these seraphim, which are the angels. It's basically just a head with three sets of wings, which is really an old, very old symbol of an angel. And that is a seraph in Hagia Sophia, which I always like them because it's like head in the middle of a bunch of feathers. And there is detail of the lantern. Later on, when we get to the end of the 19th and early 20th centuries, we'll see a Spanish architect named Antoni Gaudí. This looks almost as if it could have been done by Gaudí. This like weird, like this almost like this these rays coming off the top are very organic. And it really does seem to have this like more organic appearance to it. That is a little late. I think that's a little bit misplaced. But here is this, I guess we can just say this is a Venetian interior of the, I think you could say it's late Baroque with this wallpaper bed with a really beautiful headboard. Armchairs, pilasters, and then the crazy, like this is almost like creepy theatrical, like where the bed is a stage, literally. Some furniture. Yeah, the base here, this is a comparison with a cassone. Over the top, excessive ornament. It's kind of what the Baroque era is known for. I really did not like Baroque at all when I was first learning about it in school. It was just too excessively decorated. And the term Baroque was originally meant as an insult. Baroque comes from the Italian barocco, which is an imperfectly shaped pearl. And it was really meant as a derisive term because of the excessive amount of ornament. That it was just like, it's just too much.
Mr. Connor, You
Yes.
mentioned that you didn't like Baroque when you first learned about it, but I guess then you learned about Rococo and you thought the Baroque was fine.
Could you say that again?
I was saying that you mentioned that you didn't like Baroque at first, but then I suppose you learned about Rococo and then you thought Baroque was not working.
Yes. Well, that's that could be a reason.
So you're saying this is so ornate, but I know what's coming, and I'm like, no, it's not that, right?
Yes, it could be. Yes, it could be worse.
Yeah.
It could always be worse. One of the reasons I've grown to like aspects of the Baroque is that I appreciate the work that went into it. I also appreciate some of the story, like there was a very good reason for the Catholic Church to create these very elaborate and dramatic churches, because they were trying to basically they were fighting back against against the mass defection that came from the Protestant Reformation. And so there's a little bit more of a story there. And when you learn, to me, when I learn the story, it makes me appreciate it a little bit more. So here are some Italian upholstered chairs. These are basically it's really the same thing as it's the sedia. Now you see here, you see these the arm support here. Those are turned. So you saw the video of the guy with the bow lathe. That's pretty much how those would have been made. They didn't have anything motorized, so you have to turn it yourself. And that bow lathe allows you to create a lot of torque so it can go fast. There's a Renaissance sedia. Pretty much the same thing. This one from the these later ones, these are just in better shape. They look better. Now here, this is a good example of where Rococo or the Baroque does get exaggerated. They exaggerate this scroll motif. The scroll motif becomes very popular. Suggest strong movement, organic forms such as water or waves, like a crashing wave. This is where we will get more into the with the Rococo. It really becomes obvious. And then here, heraldic cartouche from the Renaissance. So this is like a similar. You see the scrolls here are even more dramatic and exaggerated than they are here. With Renaissance is still under control. Here, come on. Where is the chair? Where am I supposed to sit? In the middle of all that gold. So it's, if you went into someone's house and you saw this, this chair sitting there, in the living room, you might think ooh, God, it's a little over the top. But it would have fit an Italian Baroque interior. If this is a throne chair, it would have fit that location better than it would if I had it in my place. It would be funny. Okay. So that is the Italian Baroque. Okay, yeah, that's good. I'm going to take a break here. Let's come back at 7 o'clock, and we will talk about the French.